Hi, this is Ed Cohen, your broadcast host on Global TV Talk Show, a service of globalbusinessnews.net. I'm in San Diego, California. It's a little after 7:30 in the morning here, and I am really honored to be able to have as my guests two outstanding business people in Dubai area, UAE. First of all, Sandrine Bardot is a renowned expert on international comp and ben. Hello, Sandrine.
Thank you to have me. Hi.
Again, and thank you. And for the first time, I'd like to welcome from Coca-Cola Ojan in UAE, Rohit Manucha. Hello, Rohit.
Hey, how you doing, Edwin?
Hey, this is cool. Very cool to have you. Okay, so we're going to begin. Rohit, you HR director and recognized as a rising star in the field. So how does that feel today?
Yeah, well, it's always good to be recognized, whether that's within the organization or even at a larger platform. So I can't complain. It feels great.
Yeah,
that was the easy question.
I bet. So are you working from home? Not right now. I see you are, but are you normally at home, or you got an office in one of those beautiful buildings?
We do have an office in one of those beautiful buildings, as you put it, but yes, we are working out of home at the moment.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Well, as you see, I'm in my dining room, and that's a picture over there of Venice Canal that I took a while ago. So rather than a stupid-looking bookcase, we decided to do that.
Well, you cannot look over there, but probably I can give you a tour of my living room. We're actually painting a canal in Venice. It's the third painting over there. And of course, you see my treadmill and you see the works behind that.
Yeah.
But yeah, good memories of that place.
So you are the painter, is that correct?
If calling somebody a painter who uses paint by numbers, then yes, guilty as charged.
Yeah, I see. So you're not Michelangelo. Okay.
Not
so, expert HR, not expert painter.
So Sandrine, you are, I see on LinkedIn, very, very active. You are embarking on a major campaign right now.
Yes.
So tell us about your campaign, please.
So I'm starting to gently raise awareness on just my profile for the time being, which will lead to a more focused campaign as I'm about to launch into online training and subscription models to coach and teach compensation and benefits online and bring that knowledge that I have to people at their home or in their workplace. But as I can't do the face-to-face trainings anymore, I'm going to go now and do it online and reach more people and be more affordable at the same time.
And don't forget to monetize it. So, so let me.
Don't need a rewards person that.
So let me ask you a couple of questions. This is part of the Bardot group. Is that correct?
Yes, that's the name of my company. My brand is called Compensation Insider. That's where I have my blog. I've not decided the name for my training and the subscription model yet, but they will be related to compensation and benefits. So, and I will announce it in a big way.
So I see on your website that you're very, very active as a writer, a blogger, if you will, a publisher. And you have guest articles as well.
Yes.
And the world of compensation and benefits now, particularly as a result of the virus, it's a little crazy, isn't it? How a company, I guess each company is very different.
Yeah. I would say, generally speaking, there are a number of things in the context that apply to all organizations. There is a lot of uncertainty. Many organizations have either reduced pay or here in the UAE, people might have lost their job and we don't have an unemployment coverage system in place in the country. In some of the GCC countries, so the GCC being the Gulf Cooperation Council, so that's Saudi Arabia, UAE, Kuwait, Bahrain, Oman, and Qatar, don't have necessarily a system in place for people to stay if they don't have a job, because in most cases you need to have a job you need to have a work permit in order to have a residence permit, or you need to be sponsored by somebody who has a work permit. So we see lots of people, and especially from the Asian and the continent, so subcontinental Asia, but also I think Filipinos, who are asking to be repatriated to their home country because they lost their job. So it creates a lot of constraints on the environment at the moment. And for the first time in our part of the world, where the economy is hugely dependent on what we call expats, which are the non-national people. So I'm an expat, irrespective of the kind of, let's say, a package that I have, but I'm called an expat, for example. So this has created a lot of strain at the moment, and our economy is being based on relying on those expats. Will struggle a little bit in the beginning, because for the first time we have to recruit only from people who are here around us. And I think that Rohit is going to have some experience of that as well.
Yeah, Rohit, what do you think about all this business of unemployment, and what is Coca-Cola doing about that?
Right. So there are a couple of things over here. So Orjan Coca-Cola is a JV between the Orjan Group Holding and, of course, Coke. And we have our own set of brands associated with our own products, such as Rani, Barbican, and Vimto, and so on and so forth. In my role, I head the group talent for Orjan Group, as well as, of course, ACBC at the corporate level as the HR head. So in terms of coming back to your question of unemployment, what you see is an amount of exodus, like what Sandrine covered, of talent, particularly people who are in this market. It's a transient market, right? Most of the talent which comes in are expats. Of course, there are different levels of salary scales that they come in at, and you see a lot of exodus happening around that. However, as many organizations have taken a call currently, they're even looking at salary cuts is one option, of course. They're also looking at deferral of benefits, where they're not saying we're going to cut your salary immediately, where you do not have an impact on your disposable income. However, you would take a certain hit, and that would continue for a time being. Oh, that's a cute little... Is that a dog? Is that a cat?
So, Alexandra, right. Hello, Alexandra.
I'm sorry, my dog is attacking me.
Well,
nice.
It's okay to have your dog talk.
Yeah. you can have my kids walking in any moment. So.
Yeah. So where are you from, Alexandra?
I grew up in Australia, and I've lived here in Dubai for the last 12 years.
Oh, well, welcome. And what kind of work do you do?
So I work in compensation and benefits, specifically in reward. I know Sandrine quite well for quite a few years here in Dubai. And I haven't seen her face for a long time. So yeah, it's nice. It's nice to see you.
Well, welcome to the show. So
thank you.
So Rohit, it's, I'm here in California, which is of course a world away, but tell me why there isn't more of a compensation insurance in a company like Coca-Cola for UAE?
So, right. The compensation insurance structure per se is, again, you have to take into account a couple of parameters. One, we are not Coke exactly. We are a JV between the two entities. And in accordance with the local laws, you do have your social security, which you pay to nationals. And of course, for other people, you have an ex gratia and an USP amount paid out. However, you do notice that this market, given the fact that this market has had a number of, peaks and troughs, have institutions such as banks who offer you insurance on loss of pay, per se. But it is not deep-rooted to the extent that you would see it in more developed markets, where you'd end up having compensation insurance. Individuals also end up taking up those insurance plans. But again, it's a very rudimentary element which still exists in this region. And that's true of GCC region largely, and you do not see much prevalence of that. The reliance is majorly on social security and to a large extent on ex gratia. To that extent, even outplacement services really haven't, I would say, found their footing in this region to that extent.
Okay, thank you. Sandrine, let's go to you and talk about compensation and benefits. And employees generally just want to have a positive work experience, right? But how do you motivate them to do better, especially in times of stress?
So if you think about it from, let's say, a package composition, I think that what we're seeing at the moment in the UAE and GCC, as well as, for example, in the US, more focus on some elements of the benefits package, on the well-being elements, on recognition platforms, and especially peer-to-peer recognition is starting to take foot in the region. It's not as widely developed, for example, as in the US. But I think that in times where money is tight, which I think unless you're a manufacturer of hand sanitizer, you're probably feeling that times are a little bit tight. I think peer-to-peer recognition with gamification, with or without a financial component attached to it, is an important thing. And I think as well that a lot of organizations have tried to identify opportunities for maintaining the upskilling or the reskilling of their employees, which is in a time where you don't necessarily find as many people. Again, I'm talking for us in the GCC, it's not like in the US, but you don't necessarily find as many candidates as you would have had before the crisis. Upskilling and reskilling becomes more important for organizations to adapt to the current situation, I would say.
Why do people quit jobs? It's because of the direct manager, isn't it?
Okay, if this is up to me, I don't believe in that saying at all. I believe no, honestly, I believe, look at it this way. If an organization does well, you have an organization's going gung-ho saying we're the best places to work. At that point of time, the credit doesn't go to the manager, does it? It goes like, we are the best places to work. Similarly, it's the same organization which has hired that manager using the same metrics, right? It's not like the manager is suddenly born within the organization. He or she has risen through the ranks or joined afresh, going through the same psychometrics, same behavioral evaluations, and hired for the job. If it so happens that such a manager is creating an issue for the people underneath him or her, then it's not the manager itself, but also the entire organization which has failed the people underneath. So I believe it's the organization's responsibility at the end of the day. And it's the people leave the company, not necessarily the manager, because the company has failed those people or that talent. And it's easy for a company to pass the buck onto the manager and say, you know what, it was the manager. But the reality is we create the culture, we create the values. If somebody is not living with those values, it's making it difficult for somebody else to survive. It's our job to protect such talent, not let it go. So.
Okay, Sandrine, it's your turn.
So I agree in part with what Rohit just said, because I think that, yes, it's too easy to say that it's always because of the manager. However, I personally have left jobs because of my direct manager, so I know it can happen. I believe that there is, even though there is a shared responsibility in terms of the organization and the culture, there is an extra weight on the line manager, that if the line manager is somebody who doesn't trust, who is micromanaging, or who is bullying or harassing somebody, which it happened to me one time in my career, then the employees will want to leave. And the ones who will leave are typically those who are maybe the ones that you might want to keep, because typically they have more opportunities to leave. They are the good, what we call the good employees. So unfortunately, I agree. I think there is an element of company responsibility, and that's to listen to the results of the engagement survey. That's to try and identify if you see indirect signs of lack of engagement or loss of engagement or reduced engagement, like things that is management by walking. If you see that people start to arrive later, leave earlier, don't smile, don't chat with their colleagues, and well, that's in a pre-COVID world where everybody was on the same workspace, but at the time, if you start to see that as an organization, it is our responsibility to not close our eyes and to try and educate the manager maybe, or try to figure out what's going on. And sometimes you might be able to save a situation simply by transferring somebody to a new position within your organization. So it's not necessarily having to go to a big extremes. But so I think it's both.
Mix of both.
Yeah. Alexandra, what would you say to all this?
I think I agree with Sandrine in taking sort of it's a bit of both. I've definitely seen, cases of where people, and, spoken to people who have, good people, like top key performers who are leaving the company, basically saying, I'm leaving because of my manager, in an exit interview kind of fashion. There's a lot of evidence for that, but it's neither one nor the other. There's definitely a case for both. And it comes down to the individual circumstances, I suppose, as well.
Yeah, okay. Sandrine, go ahead, please.
Can I add something? I think there's also an element of comp and ben, which is coming there. That is, if you don't pay your employees enough, and if the market is good, they're going to be poached by people who are willing to pay just a little bit more to get your fully educated, fully trained people. And so we also have a responsibility in comp and ben, I would say.
So, okay, Rohit, the stage is yours. Tell us about your challenges in this regard, and do you have an example you could share with us?
Right. So for us, if you look at it from a compensation standpoint alone, I think the biggest challenge is being a transient market that it is. You do have expat packages, local packages. You do have different. Luckily, we don't have taxes over here. So in a way, your tax complications when it comes to pay structures goes out of the window. But of course, when you're looking at cost of living adjustments, because certain markets, inflation rates, devaluation rates vary. So there are a bit of complications associated with that. There's not so much of job evaluation to the extent that you would have seen in the Southeast Asian markets. People throw it around easily, but they don't really have that level of understanding and that depth associated with the job evaluation that you would expect. I'm coming myself from Hay Group. The amount of hours of training that we went through, and probably Sandrine would know about that, it's madness. And then what I see of this region, I feel that there is a sort of a skill gap when it comes to CNB to that extent. And Sandrine, of course, is a stalwart in CNB, so there's unparalleled regard for the work that she does. So I am sure she knows that what kind of gaps which I'm talking about which exist in this region. So in terms of the challenges which you face over here is, look at it this way. A reason why somebody would come in this region is primarily because they would end up earning more disposable income or save more than they would do in their home country. Yeah. When we're talking about the expatriates, of course, locals, you would get talent from within. What happens when this does not keep pace, which is not the case right now, but if it does not keep pace, so you're looking at what, about a 3%, a 5%, 10% best case scenario salary increases, whereas developed markets increase by about 15 to 20%. These markets move a lot slower. And if your compensation structures are not created appropriately or job sizes are not appropriate, it creates an issue. And people end up leaving at junior levels for small salary increases, at senior levels for substantial salary increases. It shows you your pay grading and pay structures all over the place. The bigger issue is people do not understand the larger element of compensation. So, for example, I would look at the money which hits my bank account. I would not look at all the other initiatives which would be done for me. The holistic rewards is what we're talking about. The major challenge is making individuals understand what other elements, cash as well as non-cash, which go into their account. You do not see too much of LTIP over here in place, like stocks and co-shares. This region doesn't have too many of those. So that's another issue in terms of retention or a golden handcuff. But in terms of making people aware of their compensation structure, largely in terms of focusing rather just on compensation, but holistic well-being. Like, for example, what we did was link it to the employee well-being, not physical, mental, emotional, but we looked at a scorecard where we said, if you were earning an X amount of bonus, you could do better if you look after your own physical health. And a scorecard was worked with talking to individual hospitals based on confidentiality clauses built in, as well as the individual willing to go through that, saying if you look after your health, you could earn an X amount over and above your compensation. Where we saw that benefit is loss ratios on our insurance reduced. Simple things like having a sick leave policy where you say, if you're absent for one day, give me a sick leave report, which is shocking. And you do away with that. creates huge savings for an organization because A, it shows you have more trust on the individuals. B, if I was to take a sick leave and I know I have to give a sick leave certificate, pay 70 dirhams or whatever, $10 for that, $20 for that, I'll take it for 2 days. So the purpose for which it was built, the design thinking element, is totally misplaced. You're trying to solve a problem, that absenteeism, you created a stupid policy, and now that's resulted in increasing your loss ratios of insurance. You do away with that and you see the benefits. Now the problem is how you do away with that, getting people to understand, not only just the employees who are facing it, but also the management. That's the job of the rewards guy over here, is to basically constantly delicately balance that, navigate between these two dimensions and show the business results.
So Sandrine, what is the difference, if you could describe quickly, if you don't mind me interjecting here, question about extrinsic versus intrinsic? And, how do all these fancy words, how does that relate to rewards and people engagement?
Okay. So extrinsic means any form of motivation which is coming from outside of you as a person. So that would be all the financial elements in terms of comp and ben that we can give to an employee. Their base pay, their bonus, their stock plan, and so on. Intrinsic means coming from inside. And this is where you have elements where the recognition schemes, for example, the work environment, maybe the career development and career opportunity, and all those elements maybe of well-being would be more related to that, because this is where the person feels taken care of in a more holistic manner. And rebounding on what Rohit was saying just a few minutes ago, I think there is an industry which is very good at making its employees understand the whole value of their package, not just the cash. And this is because it's an industry which is notorious for low packages. This is the hospitality industry. When you work in hotels, you know that you're not going to be paid a lot, but you also know that you're going to be taken care of in different ways. You might have free housing, you might have free food, you might have free, taken care of your clothes and all this kind of stuff that people come to expect because they know that they don't get the cash. So that industry has managed to transform its very thin margins and its an inability to pay a competitive package if it was to fight against, banks, oil and gas, or other such industries, or financial services, into an advantage, and by attracting a kind of people who are more interested in those other elements. So it is possible to do it, but I would say that if you don't address a minimum of the layer of extrinsic motivation and don't guarantee, in the Maslow pyramid of the hierarchy, you have at the bottom the safety, security, and this is what your base pay is about. If you don't provide a minimum cover with that and people don't feel safe, you can throw any amount of free massage or whatever, recognition, let me give you a badge or something. It's not going to work. People will not be happy and engaged. So you need to have a balance between the two. You cannot say, hey, all on the intrinsic and nothing on the extrinsic. It's a balance of the two.
Yeah.
Plus you have industry expectations as well.
So Rohit, please jump in. And then I'd like to follow up after you're finished with that point about why not have some of your people who had to depart from Dubai, why not have them work remotely?
Okay, so I'm going to answer both the questions. So the first point to Sandrine's point, a lot of employees have now actually started looking, or a lot of organizations have now, and we're exploring that as well, is to look at individualization of pay to the extent that I can choose, because again, you don't have complexities of individual taxes here. So you can decide how I want to structure my basic salary allowances and so on and so forth. Look at it this way. If I am X grade and I get child benefits of, let's say, $90,000 of $100,000, wouldn't that be amazing? But yes, let's say we have that number. Yeah, considering our schools are expensive over here. But no, let's just say that I have $100,000, yeah, for sake of simplicity. And I say for up to 3 children, yeah. But then I put a caveat over there. For the first 2 children, it's 80,000. It's 80,000. The third child, then you can get 100,000. So the message I get is that you're telling me my first 2 children are important, and the third child is worth only 20,000 in education. You have organizations which still have that archaic structuring in grades and benefits. And that we are saying that doesn't make sense. For example, if I am the CEO and I don't have any children, why do I need 200,000 sitting on my bank, which I can't claim? Why don't you give me that in terms of other benefits? So we have these questions coming up, and of course, we're addressing them. Organizations are doing a lot about that. Coming to your next point, which is all people who are leaving the organization, the future of work, and this is what's going to happen now. Work from home is here to stay, not the current forced environment work from home where we are looking at, but literally work from home to the extent that think of a network organization structure where people are working in project teams or associating across organizations. Multiply that with the gig workforce that you have. But the only difference is they're no longer gig workers to that extent. They're still your employees, but they're probably sitting in India, probably sitting in Vietnam. They need not have to fly into Dubai at expat packages, and they can continue working on local packages over there and support you. What stops us is the legal issues associated with that. Organizations, legalities, and the politics associated with that still hasn't figured it out. But once that happens, it doesn't stop you from having a network structure, having people sitting out of India, sitting out of different countries, and working in local pays versus working in Dubai. For example, that was the construct of offshoring and outsourcing, but at a large scale level. Here I'm saying at an individual level. I need 10 people to work on this project. Let me have them, hire them on road from India. They can work out of India. They don't need to come down here. So that's the future. That is the future.
Right. So the work permit issue is non-existent then?
No, but the catch then becomes, from a rewards perspective, you need to automate your systems. Now think about the complexities. Look at the amount of countries that you now have to start factoring in individual tax slabs. You have to figure out the individualization of the compensation salaries, the grading structure which is associated and linked to it. So you need to holistically have everybody linked together to their unique roles. Look at the complexities. Now, this is where big data comes in. This is the era where we have a lot of information about all of our employees, and even more than what we can process, because capability issues, B, and as always, time is the issue. But the reality is this is the time when we can actually identify whether operating model makes sense or not, whether it's fit for purpose, scale it to the extent that it becomes a network structure, and then start looking at individualization of plans. At that stage, whether you have a physical office in point A or point B doesn't matter. For example, I remember when I was at Walmart as a consultant, it was a couple of years ago, and that's the era when brick and mortar was going down and you had e-commerce picking up. And we remember having the discussion whether we may transition onto e-commerce at that point of time or not. This similarly, what was it saying? Offices are dead, long live the offices, right? So that's the same concept. Now you have organizations with like Facebook, which will actually end up giving you an X amount of money, $1,000, I understand, to help you set up your offices. So there was an era when we had physical offices, fancy offices, laundromats, you name it, you had it. Now you're saying we have that fund, which you're not going to spend. Let's give it to them to renovate their own house. So I can have my own private little office rather than sitting in the living room.
Yes, I understand totally. This is where I am. So
I would like to maybe comment on that. I think that, for example, in the UAE, a first step before this fully network organization, which for many local organizations is still culturally quite far away, despite the current work from home experience. I think a first step might be to open even just the job market from, let's say, instead of recruiting only in Abu Dhabi or in Dubai, that you could open the market, and especially I'm thinking for local Emirati ladies. For example, opening talent pools in Al Ain, which is a city which is in the desert, and where it's a little bit more conservative than Dubai and Abu Dhabi. So the ladies might not necessarily be able to travel as much to go to work, and it's kind of far away. So the commute is a bit difficult. So there might be a first element to that. Personally, I'm not sure that we would have such a fully networked organization in the sense of having people who are all remote and all technical employees of the organization, I think a solution, at least in the first stage, might come from freelancer platforms, organizations like Upwork and so on, which right now are very much focused on IT work, marketing work, social media work. For example, in HR, there's not really much work to be found, as I should know, as a freelancer. But I think this could come, because then it's a question of negotiating how much do you pay me for this project, and the company doesn't have to take care of the tax, and the person has to take care of their tax and negotiate what they want to be paid in order to live in the country where they're currently based. And that might also help with what we call the global nomads, which are people who, especially in the younger generations, are starting to travel as a way of life, I would say. So I think there will be definitely a big change. I think the workplace is going to change as well. We will come back to the workplace, but it will probably be different. I think that organizations will realize, those who are smart and who are not like currently, putting spying software to check the clicks that people are doing on their computer to check that they're really working. But those who are smart will understand that maybe the workspace now is a place for socialization, and maybe you come 2 days per week, you make all the meetings on the same day, you need to reorganize how teams are working, but you make like 1 or 2 days per week where people can socialize, and then 1 or 2 days where maybe they have more focused work. I think it's Google, and I read an article, I think Facebook as well, made some experiments on that, and they saw that when they reorganized the work of their engineers, the software development guys, if they managed to get them to work on the same day and move all the meetings on the same day and reduce therefore the interruptions when those people are doing their development work, that the productivity, the number of errors and so on was going down, the productivity was increasing. So I think it's a question of testing what is going to work for your organization. And obviously that doesn't apply to all those positions that still need to be out there, all those frontline workers. It's for all of us, the privileged, who can work from an office.
So let me ask you a question, both of you, about engagement in this era of work from home and remote. How do you work on engagement issues? Rohit.
Okay. So engagement, I think Sandrine did mention right at the very beginning, there is the Maslow's need hierarchy. And of course, you have the organizational values and the cultural competencies, the behavioral competencies, which have a role to play in this. But the most important aspect is to understand what drives you as an individual. Now, apart from just the Maslow's need hierarchy, it's easy to say that it exists, and I have as I move above, I reach self-actualization. The bigger challenge around that is, do I know myself the way I think I know myself? So there's this element of a blind spot. So if you think about the Johari window, how I project myself to others, how others see me, and how I think I am, and what I even don't know about myself. So for me to reach the self-actualization stage becomes extremely difficult. So to answer your question, there are two aspects to it. A is, do I really know what drives me, engages me? And is the organization providing that? Or am I going out and asking it? And is the organization facilitating that? Whether that's from a reward standpoint, career progression, or just a rotation, talent development, or global assignments. When you link that, the other question is, do I have sufficient data points in terms of opportunities to express that? More often than not, organizations have an engagement as a tick in the box, at least in this region. You usually see it a once in a year exercise, and then you see a LinkedIn post, you're the best place to work. And we did so many activities and all that stuff. Yeah. The big issue is, so what? How often am I engaging with my employees? What are the data points that I'm getting? How am I validating that? What am I doing about that? It's a lot of work which goes around that piece. And that's where the entire discussion needs to begin. So from employee engagement, nothing really has changed. What has changed, however, is the focus more on mental well-being. Primarily because up till now, people used to think physical well-being, to a certain extent, emotional well-being. Now, mental well-being is coming out of the dark ages, taboo concept. And a lot of people are now openly talking about it, to the extent that it's forced work from home. You're not interacting with people. Like the idea that Sandrine said, you can come 2 days to the workplace, interact with each other, go back. Of course, with social distancing, you can't even have that touch. You have your culture of rubbing noses, you have a culture of greeting people, you have a culture of hugging. You can't do all of that. Human beings need that touch. And now you're getting used to that. That mental construct is changing. And that's how do you help employees cope with that is where the engagement levels are affected. More importantly, what's also happening is the work from home, people are finding themselves they're more effective. But it's typically just like when people hoard, whenever there's a pandemic, people start hoarding and then naturalization starts happening. Similarly, you're effective in the beginning because you think you're being monitored, your emails are being checked, your time in and time on your laptop is being logged. I don't know if people have that conspiracy, but but people think that way. And then over a period of time, they realize I'm burning out because I'm working crazy hours. And while you may think you're effective, but you're not, you may be efficient, but you're not effective because in the longer run, it burn out.
Right. Sandrine, so what do you think about compensating people from all this stress?
So I don't think there's a financial compensation for that, but what I've seen is some organizations have put more of the, I would say, employee, the EAPs in place, the employee assistance programs in place, where people can get that access to the support that they need when they need it in a anonymous manner, where the employer doesn't know about it except through statistics that are aggregated and made non-named, and which probably today would be a good way to help people. We've seen the beginning of a switch towards telemedicine, even here in the UAE, which was most notably absent in our part of the world, and only just started to launch. I remember I attended like maybe 5 months ago, one organization launching the first telehealth service that had been approved by the healthcare authorities in the UAE. And they were so proud. And then all of a sudden, pandemic, and everybody is trying to get it. All the hospitals are proposing it and so on. I think this will help. From a financial compensation, what I've seen, and maybe not for stress, but for more of a risk and therefore stress-related, some organizations have decided to give some extra bonuses to their frontline workers or to some of their frontline workers as a thank you for the risk that they're taking, but also today the grief that they might be taking from some of the general public who, depending on the country, because here in the UAE, I would say that I think that most people do respect. We are obliged to wear a face mask as soon as we leave the home. And I would say that most everybody complies. But I follow a little bit what's happening in the US, and I think that where you don't have this being mandatory and this hodgepodge of recommendations, no, yes, you should do it, but no, yes, it's become, if you're a frontline worker and you have instructions from your employers that clients or consumers should come into your restaurant or your retail place, but wear a face mask, and they don't want to wear it, people get insulted, get verbally assaulted, and so on, and hopefully not worse than that. And I think that this is something that we also need to acknowledge is not a good feeling for them to have, So it's important that we put something in place.
So let me ask you both about the multicultural aspects of the employee population in the UAE. Rohit, I understand from your LinkedIn that you're an advisor to the government about tolerance
That was a project, yes.
Yeah. So why don't you go a little deep on that? That's very interesting to me, and I think it will be to our global audience.
Right. So the best part about the UAE government is that they have looked at different themes throughout the year. So last year was the year of tolerance, and with that regard, there is a Ministry of Tolerance. Given the fact that you're a global hub and you have multiple cultural nuances coming in terms of different people from different nationalities, different beliefs, tolerance is well respected and carried out in this region to the extent that you have a ministry around that. And there was a project that I was working with them. We are part of people who were called in as experts to talk about the shared values and how do we link that to the organizational vision and how do we cascade that. So that was a project which I had worked on as an advisor last year for the Ministry of Tolerance. And that's it. But it's pretty interesting because at the end of the day, the amount that the government does to invest back in not only its citizens, but also its residents, it does not create a sense of distinction where one is better than the other. But on the contrary, it's more like you're a homogeneous society working together, even to the extent that the COVID response, there was never a sense of, us versus them. It's a very collaborative approach. And if you see the values at a country level being then cascaded at an organizational level, you see the theme which continues, that we are in this together. And the element of COVID in the sense is basically, I have to be mindful of others because my health depends on your well-being.
Yes.
So to the extent where Sandrine said that the reason why people wear masks here is not just because it's a ruling, it's because the sense of concern and respect that I have for the other individual as well, which culturally exists over here in this region. So it's not a let's debate and discuss and mull this over why people die, but it's more like let's first take what the necessary steps which need to be done, and then let's discuss, debate, and whatever we need to do, but ensure that we do not have what we have. And as you could see, we have the largest amount of testing. So we're number 3 per million population, if I'm not mistaken. So there's a lot of seriousness associated with a lot of aspects, but that stems directly from the values of the leaders in this region and what they've done and ensuring that all organization cultural values intertwine with that, whether that's an MNC or a local player.
Thank you, Rohit. That is really going to be helpful to our global listening, watching audience. Sandrine, could you please address the multiculturalism and from a compensation and benefits point of view?
So purely from a comp and ben point of view, I think I remember when I first started working with the Middle East, I wasn't based yet in the UAE, but I had this position where the headquarters for the region was in Beirut. And my colleague from Beirut sent me, I remember, we're talking back in 1999, 3 salary structures and with 3 very different levels of pay. And I was like, whoa, okay, that's very nice. I asked for the salary structure. He sent me last year and the previous year, and they have big salary increases. And I hadn't understood that at the time, when we're talking back in the late 90s, early 2000s, that most organizations had one salary structure for Westerners, another one for, let's say, regional Arabs, and another one for other, whatever that means.
Yeah.
Okay. And basically, you would be paid based on your, more or less, your nationality. Okay. Or your nationality or your the country where you're coming from. This has mostly disappeared, at least in the UAE. I'm not sure it has completely disappeared in all organizations across the GCC, but in the UAE, it doesn't exist anymore. That doesn't mean that we don't differentiate anymore. I think now the scale is just one salary structure for the whole organization, but we still see some pay differentiation based on the nationality. The way that it's happening is that in most cases, levels of jobs tend to be taken by certain types of, let's say, geographic origins of the job holders. So typically your labor is mostly coming from Pakistan, Bangladesh, maybe some African countries. We're seeing some Chinese now as well. Then you would have your retail workers would be, Filipinos and maybe we see some Africans, some regional Arabs. And then you would have in management, you would have the Westerners, the local nationals, and some of the more educated other nationalities who have already had like work abroad and stuff like that. So that's how now the differentiation is kind of happening, is that by default, we are super diverse and inclusive, but if you look at in each layer of the organization, maybe not as much. That would be my perception. However, I think that it also depends very much on the hiring manager. So you see some hiring managers, if they're a certain nationality, tend to recruit people who are coming from the same country, and others who don't care so much about who they recruit in terms of nationality and will be more open to have somebody from a completely different, even religious and cultural background than they are. So I think there's also an element of that. But the good thing that I see is that we see less questions in recruitment about where are you coming from, even though we're not rid yet of the question of how much did you earn before, which I know in the US now it's like big no to ask this question, might be even illegal. I'm not so sure because I don't follow as much. Here we can still ask that kind of question, which tends to perpetuate, unfortunately, the differences in pay. So I personally believe that we shouldn't. We should say, for this job, I'm willing to pay $20,000 to $25,000 a month, and irrespective of the nationality of the person who's going to come. And if it's somebody who was making $12,000 because their previous employer was a jerk, let's say it, well, good for them, they can double their pay. And if they're coming from a job that was at $40,000 before, well, it's their decision if they really want to take it or not. I think this would be more fair. And I hope that more and more organizations are moving towards that.
Okay. So, yes, please, Rohit, take the stage.
So what Sandrine's point is is that accurate, because if you look at it, the way you usually have a pay structure is you have pay ranges, you have a min, max. Let's just keep it simple, yeah. If I was to hire for a position, I'm not bothered about the individual's competencies and, of course, the caliber which he brings on board. But from hiring for a position, it's at a certain compa ratio, both internal and external to the market. What he or she earns prior to that, ideally, in an idealistic scenario, should not matter. But there are organizations who usually try to, again, play around with that, saying, hey, you're earning 10,000, I do a 25% increase, I'll bring you up 12,500. But my pay range starts at 15,000. It doesn't make sense to do that. But the person who's doing it goes like, oh, I saved the company $2,500. No, you didn't. You just created a huge compensation mess for the organization subsequently. The other thing is, again, it's a transit market. So the way most of the recruitment people, they hire, you were saying, you will be earning X amount in your local currency. So if you see the diaspora of people at the junior roles, are people who are from those regions where the currency conversion ratio is skewed to the extent that if I pay you $100, it'll be equal to thousands in your local currency. But I'm sorry, the cost of living, however, in UAE is more expensive. When people come here, they realize that. And then you see them jumping from job to job. And that's, you see the cycle of this continuing. Hence, you fool the person to come here, and then you have the minimum wages, because you can't hire people below certain minimum wages. The people realize they can't sustain with them, so they jump another company. Then the company says, you know what, I have a nutrition problem. Well, of course you will have a nutrition problem because of all these reasons. So it exists. So the catch over here is there are different levels of organizations and different maturity at which they stand. So some companies have established compensation policies, processes, and systems. Some are getting there. Some do not even want to change from that old admin mindset of HR. So you see a mix of companies here in this region.
This is really an interesting conversation, and I think we could have a chapter 2 of this someday. So I welcome you to come back, and let's go to a deeper place on this stuff. So, Rohit, I really am just honored to have you and your organization featured on this broadcast. And as we sum up here, where do we go from here? What do you think is going to happen in your region, in your company?
Thanks for that, Edwin. It's an honor to be here. I've always wanted to be in a session with you and, of course, Sandrine as well. So this is a dream come true. Awesome. I can sleep peacefully tonight. Honestly, no, I'm not kidding. In terms of future, where we go from here, it's going to be a bit of a hybrid model. To be very honest, every person who's been a future teller so far has got it all wrong. The COVID situation. So it's all your business plans, all your contingency plans are out of the window. So, but I've always said that work from home is, to a large extent, wherever possible. And the word which Sandrine uses, privileged. If you are able to do that, let's explore that. Of course, if you have to go and deliver bottles of water, of Coke, or whatever, at that stage, you have to be at the grassroots. But having said that, I do believe there'll be a hybrid model where we would start looking at exploring talent from other regions, not necessarily local markets where you're based. The concept of headquarters per se and physical offices would slowly be dismantled, provided the legal visa-related rules and the legal loopholes are addressed. And that's the main criteria over here. Compensation to a very large extent will be more and more individualized, because if you're talking about design thinking, employee experience, that cannot happen if you paint everybody with a broad brush or a broad band. It has to be individualized. And that's what the people want. So these are my key 3 takeaways. And over to Sandrine then.
Thank you very much, Rohit. Sandrine, please help us summarize. And where do we go from here from a Comp and Ben point of view?
Okay, so for me, I would say that things that I think that organizations need to address in the short term, I did mention that retraining, upskilling, rescaling your employee population. Trust your employees with the work from home situation. I think maybe some companies are ready to do it. Some managers are not always ready to do it. So they need to be taught that they can trust their employees and that their role is not necessarily one of being a policeman, but more of a coach. Okay. And I think as well, organization, as Rohit was saying, in the first time might start to think about hiring more gig workers, freelancers, contract workers, outsourced employees to get that degree of flexibility that they need to get until the systems, like Rohit was saying, are able to accommodate people from all over the world. In the medium to long term, I think we've touched on it. There will be more and more focus, especially in terms of benefits, on telemedicine, probably unemployment cover, universal healthcare in the UAE, because that probably also highlighted a number of shortcomings of the current systems, pensions. And I would say focus by organizations, we didn't talk about that at all, but on what is called ESG. So more focus on what is our purpose, the social aspects of work, and how organizations need to be positioned in a way that their behavior is aligned with what their official values are. And I think we see that, and there's a lot of debate in the US at the moment with what's happening, especially in terms of racial discussion. This is not filled too much in our part of the world, but we do have this huge multicultural environment where we have our own situations that we need to look into. So, and I think climate change as well, we're in a part of the world which is going to be very directly affected by it. And I think more organizations are going to realize that if we need to move forward, we need to look into not just getting money for the stakeholders, but making sure that as a society, we don't collapse. So, and that's a very sad thing to close with. Sorry about that. That was not my intention.
So much for this good sleep that I was going to have.
Okay, so someday then, if I understand correctly, someday me in California might be able to be employed remotely for Coca-Cola Ojan or some other place. I mean, I could do work for you, but setting it up right and the communications and the trust factor is really key, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, it'll be a brave new world, won't it be?
Yes.
It will. Sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Rohit, do you want people to get in touch with you? How can they find you other than LinkedIn? That's pretty good,
I'm
too.
on LinkedIn. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm not too active on Twitter. I think I need a lot more characters than just a few, which I get on Twitter. So you can catch me on LinkedIn. I usually have articles posted every other day on LinkedIn. I do not have a blog, so I use LinkedIn as that platform itself.
Well,
So, yeah.
me too. Me too. Yes, that's my mouthpiece. And Sandrine, you're doing a wonderful job on LinkedIn.
Thank you. Thank you. I use a wonderful piece of software which helps me to disseminate the content that I curate for other people. So it looks like I'm always on it, but I'm not.
Okay,
But
I'm
going to talk to you about it offline then.
Yes, I need to know that too, because
Yeah,
I'm getting
I'll
tired
have a
of
chat with you about
typing the same things every day.
And if people want to reach me, they can find me on my blog at compensationinsider.com or at Sandrine at compensationinsider.com.
Great. Okay, so let's sign off. It's just about an hour, and I thank you so much for this education. So I'm Ed in San Diego, and Sandrine Bardot in Dubai, and Rohit Manucha. Are you in Dubai also?
I'm in Dubai very much.
Yeah, okay, that's cool. Anyway, I hope we could all meet in person someday and have a glass of champagne.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right.
Bye.
All right. Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
This is
Bye.
great. All right.
Bye.
Global businessnews.net will be the home of this show on demand, global free access, free download, 24/7, anytime. Thank you, Rohit. Thank you, Sandrine. And thank you all for watching this show.